Take the 50 grand and make this whole thing disappear." The thick envelope trembled in Rosangela Batista's hands as Enrique Braganza shoved the money against her chest. But when she refused the bribe in front of the judge, she exposed a secret that shattered one of the most powerful families in New York. Rosangela Batista was 48 years old, her hands calloused from 3 years of caring for Mr. Otavio Braganza. Originally from a small, rural town in the South, she had learned early on that dignity was neither for sale nor up for negotiation. That Tuesday morning, as she adjusted her simple white uniform in the courthouse bathroom mirror, her hands trembled, but not from fear. They trembled with indignation. 3 years, 1,095 days at the side of a 91-year-old man his family had abandoned as if he were an old piece of furniture. Rosangela closed her eyes and once more saw Mr. Otavio's face in his final moments, gripping her hand as he whispered, "You were my only real family, Rosangela." The hallway of the New York State Supreme Court buzzed with high-priced lawyers in tailored suits, interns running with case files, and anxious families waiting for hearings. Rosangela walked slowly, her white sneakers making barely a sound on the polished floor. She carried a plain black folder, the kind you buy at a neighborhood stationery store. Inside it were 3 years of truths the Braganza family would rather bury with their patriarch. "Rosangela!" Enrique Braganza's deep voice echoed down the corridor. 61 years old, hair dyed black to hide the gray, belly straining against his Italian suit. Owner of Braganza Construction, one of the largest contractors in the state. "We need to talk before the hearing." Beside him, Valentina Braganza Morera adjusted her designer sunglasses, worth more than 6 months of Rosangela's wages. 57 years old, polished by Botox and cosmetic procedures, she owned 3 art galleries on the Upper East Side. Behind her, typing furiously on his phone, was Tiago Braganza, 38, perfectly groomed beard, wearing a watch that didn't just tell time, it shouted status. A social media influencer with 2 million followers, he sold courses on winner's mindset, though he'd never worked a single day in his life. "We don't have anything to discuss, Mr. Braganza." Rosangela's voice remained firm as she held the folder tight against her chest. "Of course we do." Enrique stepped closer, his expensive cologne invading her personal space. "About this little misunderstanding with my father's will." Misunderstanding. That's what they called 3 years of neglect, of abandonment, of an old man dying alone while his family only showed up to ask for money. Courtroom 12 at the Manhattan Courthouse was a solemn space that could intimidate anyone unaccustomed to it. Brown leather chairs, an elevated bench for the judge, national and state flags flanking the seal of the Republic. The air conditioning held steady at 66 degrees, far too cold for Rosangela's thin uniform. The gallery was already filling up. Journalists with notepads occupied the front row. The case had leaked to the press. Millionaire family accuses caregiver of manipulating elderly man's will had been the sensationalist headline running since the week before. Curious onlookers filled the rest of the seats, eager for real-life drama better than any primetime soap. Enrique Braganza entered leading a team that looked like it had walked straight out of a Wall Street office. 3 lawyers in flawless black suits, each carrying leather briefcases worth as much as a modest car. Their lead attorney, Dr. Evandro Machado, was famous for never losing an inheritance case in 25 years of practice. His rate, $300 an hour. Valentina followed, her stiletto heels striking the floor with sharp precision. She wore a beige designer suit that screamed curated elegance, her gold logo handbag dangling from her arm like a trophy. She sat in the front row, crossed her legs, and began examining her perfectly manicured nails, as though this entire ordeal were nothing more than an inconvenience in her packed schedule of gallery openings and cocktail parties. Tiago came in last, still recording Instagram stories. "Guys, you won't believe what I'm going through," he whispered into the camera. "Some people just take advantage of others' kindness, but justice always wins." He pocketed his phone only after a court officer scolded him, but his artificially bronzed face still held that cynical little smirk. Rosangela entered alone. No lawyer, no allies, just her and the black folder. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. "Poor thing," someone whispered. "She's going to get crushed." She sat in the witness chair, her back straight, eyes fixed ahead. She wasn't a poor thing. She was a survivor. And survivors from the rural South learn early on the difference between looking weak and being weak. The room quieted when the court officer announced, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Clarice Vasconcelos." Judge Clarice Vasconcelos was 59 years old with a reputation that made seasoned lawyers sweat. Known for her rigor and distaste for courtroom theatrics, she had presided over cases that shaped state jurisprudence. Her graying hair was tied in a strict bun. Her glasses were plain, her robe immaculate. When she sat, her gaze swept the room and lingered a moment longer on Rosangela, as though recognizing something familiar in that modest woman. Case number 0357-2024. Petition for annulment of will. Plaintiffs Enrique Braganza, Valentina Braganza Moreira, and Tiago Braganza. Defendant Estate of Otavio Braganza. Key witness Rosangela Batista. The judge adjusted her glasses. "Before we begin, are there any preliminary motions?" Dr. Evandro rose with the confidence of a man who assumed victory before even starting. "Yes, Your Honor. We request that Miss Rosangela Batista be excluded as a beneficiary until the authenticity of the will is proven." "Denied." The judge's sharp reply caught everyone off guard. "Ms. Batista is a witness, not a defendant. Proceed." Rosangela's thoughts drifted back 3 months to that Thursday afternoon when everything began to change. Mr. Otavio was seated in the worn leather armchair he refused to give up, despite the sleek modern decor Valentina had imposed on the penthouse years before. "Rosangela," he rasped, his voice that of a man who had lived too much and seen even more, "bring me that old recorder from the desk drawer. I need to document a few things before it's too late." It was strange how a man who had built a banking empire, who had negotiated with governors and presidents, now depended on a simple caregiver to ensure his last wishes were honored. Rosangela brought him the digital recorder he stubbornly called old, though it was a fairly new model. His hands shook not from early Parkinson's, but from accumulated indignation. "Turn it on, my girl. I need to set the record straight on a few things my family would rather forget." For the next 3 weeks, every afternoon after his bath and before dinner, Mr. Otavio recorded. These weren't the ramblings of a senile old man, as the family would later claim. They were precise accounts with dates, sums, and situations. How Enrique had appeared only twice in 3 years, each time asking for loans he never repaid. How Valentina had her secretary call to check in on his health. Translation: how much longer until the inheritance? How Tiago filmed videos in the penthouse to flaunt the family's luxury lifestyle, yet never showed up for Christmas. "You know what hurts the most, Rosangela?" Mr. Ottavio asked one afternoon, his gaze lost on the city skyline through the panoramic window. It's not the abandonment. It's that they think I'm a fool, that I don't notice the poorly staged act when they show up. Enrique with that fake smile, already calculating how much he'll inherit. Valentina pretending to care while mentally appraising the paintings on the walls. And Tiago, poor Tiago, who thinks success is measured in likes, doesn't even bother to hide that he's just waiting for me to kick the bucket. Rosangela just listened, applying ointment to the bed sores he'd developed from sitting so long. The family had dismissed the private nurse 3 months after his Parkinson's diagnosis. Unnecessary expense, Enrique had said. The maid can handle it. And handle it. She did. She learned to give injections, monitor blood pressure, spot warning signs. She spent her own savings on better quality adult diapers because the cheap ones the family ordered left his fragile skin raw. On his last day, a rainy Monday morning, Mr. Ottavio woke with a clarity he hadn't had in months. He called Rosangela to his bedside, gripped her hand with surprising strength and said, "Today I'm leaving, my girl. I can feel it. But first, I need to ask your forgiveness." She tried to protest, to say he wasn't going anywhere, but he interrupted her. "Forgiveness for my family, for what they'll try to do to you when I'm gone. I've documented everything, but they'll fight dirty. You're strong, Rosangela, stronger than all of them together, because you have what they lost long ago, dignity." At 3:47 p.m., as the rain tapped against the window and Rosangela held his hand, Ottavio Braganza died. He didn't call for his children. He didn't ask to see them one last time. He simply held the hand of the woman who had been more family in 3 years than they had been in decades, and left with a peaceful sigh, as though finally at rest. The sharp crack of the judge's gavel pulled Rosangela back to the present. "We'll take a 15-minute recess before the first testimony," Judge Clarice announced, rising. The gallery stirred, some stepping out for cigarettes, others checking their phones. Rosangela remained seated, but Enrique had other plans. "We need to talk now," he muttered as he passed her, his breath reeking of expensive coffee and barely contained anxiety. He gestured discreetly toward the hallway. Valentina and Tiago were already positioning themselves near the door, forming a subtle but effective barrier. Rosangela recognized the tactic. 3 years of observing the Braganza family had taught her plenty about veiled intimidation. Out in the hallway, away from the press's curious eyes, Enrique got straight to the point. From the inside pocket of his jacket, he pulled a thick manila envelope. "50,000 in cash," he said, shoving it against her chest. "Take it. Go back in there and say my father was senile, that you don't know anything about this ridiculous will. Simple as that." Rosangela looked at the envelope without touching it. $50,000. To Enrique, it was pocket change for a week. To her, it was years of hard work. The temptation lasted exactly 2 seconds, the time it took to remember Mr. Ottavio saying, "You have what they lost. Dignity." She stepped back, letting the envelope fall to the floor. "You're not understanding the situation," Valentina interjected, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "You're a maid. We're the Braganzas. Our lawyers will destroy you in there if you don't cooperate. But we're being generous, offering you an honorable way out." "Honorable?" Rosangela finally broke her silence, her calm voice striking harder than any shout. "Do you even know what honor is, Mrs. Braganza? Honor is cleaning the wounds of a forgotten father without complaint. Honor is spending your own money on medicine because you cut his health coverage. Honor is holding his hand as he died, while his children were too busy to answer the phone. Tiago, secretly filming the exchange with plans to use it against her later, stepped forward wearing that smug grin of someone who thinks the world is his personal playground. "Auntie, let's be practical. You make what? $2,000 a month? We're offering you 25 months worth all at once. It's simple math." "Math," Rosangela repeated, almost smiling. "Want me to do the real calculation for you, Tiago? 3 years, 1,095 days, 26,280 hours caring for your grandfather. Divided by the 50 grand you're offering, that's less than $1 an hour. Is that the value you put on the man who built everything you have today?" Henrique's face flushed red, the dangerous shade of someone unaccustomed to being contradicted. He leaned in so close, Rosangela could count the pores on his nose. "Listen here, you insolent country woman. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I've got connections that can make your life a living hell. Forget about ever working in New York. I'll make sure you crawl back to whatever hole you came from." "I've already lived in hell, Mr. Henrique," Rosangela replied without backing down an inch. "It's called drought in the backlands. I watched my mother starve herself so her children could have the last piece of bread. I buried my husband with my own hands because I couldn't afford a gravedigger. I raised 3 kids on my own washing clothes for others. Do you really think your threats scare me?" The silence that followed was broken only by footsteps, court staff calling everyone back in. Enrique snatched the envelope off the floor, shoved it into his pocket, and hissed, "You'll regret this." But his voice carried something new: uncertainty. For the first time in a long while, someone had told Henrique Bragança no, and that someone was the last person he expected. When everyone returned to the courtroom, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. The whispers in the gallery grew louder, some journalists typing furiously on their phones, and the Bragança family's lawyers huddled with uneasy expressions. Rosangela resumed her place with the same black folder, her back still straight, but now there was something different in her eyes. A determination that made Judge Clarice Vasconcelos watch her a few seconds longer before restarting the session. "We'll proceed with the testimony of the key witness," the judge announced, her voice slicing through the murmurs like a blade. "Mr. Evandro Machado, you may begin." The attorney rose with the pomp of a maestro about to conduct a symphony. He adjusted his Italian silk tie, took 2 calculated steps toward Rosangela, and launched his attack with surgical precision. "Mrs. Batista, how long did you work for the late Otavio Bragança?" The question seemed simple, but Rosangela knew legal traps. Her oldest son had studied law for 2 years before dropping out for lack of money, and she had picked up tricks just by listening to him recite cases aloud. 3 years and 2 months, sir. 1,136 days to be exact," she replied, meeting his eyes directly. The attorney hadn't expected mathematical precision from a housemaid. "And during that time," Evandro continued, circling her like a shark scenting blood, "you were the only person with unrestricted access to Mr. Bragança?" Rosangela refused to be intimidated. "I was the only person who was actually there, sir. Access? The whole family had it. Making use of it, that's another story." A few muffled laughs rippled through the gallery. The judge banged her gavel for order, though there was a faint gleam of approval in her eyes. Evandro wasn't used to witnesses who answered with sharp intelligence. He changed tactics, turning more aggressive. "Do you realize you're being accused of manipulating an elderly man with early dementia into changing his will? That you could face criminal charges for this?" He raised his voice at the end, a cheap tactic to rattle simple witnesses. "I realize plenty, sir," Rosangela answered calmly. I realize Mr. Ottavio took 5 different medications because each doctor your family hired gave a different diagnosis, trying to find one who'd declare him incompetent. I realize he suffered 9 days with a urinary infection because no one would authorize the purchase of antibiotics. I realize he died holding my hand because his children were too busy to answer the 43 calls I made that day. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Henrique shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Valentina suddenly found her nails fascinating, and Tiago stopped typing on his phone for the first time since he'd walked in. The judge leaned forward, her glasses reflecting the harsh, fluorescent light. 43 calls, Mrs. Batista. Can you prove that? Rosangela opened the black folder for the first time. Yes, Your Honor. Screenshots of every call, unanswered WhatsApp messages, ignored emails, all with date and timestamps. She pulled out a stapled stack of pages, each meticulously organized. I also have unfilled prescriptions, receipts for the medication I bought with my own money, and grocery bills for the special food he needed after your family canceled the house account. For the first time in 25 years, Evandro Machado felt a case slipping from his grip. He tried to regain control. How convenient that you kept all this. Almost as if you planned for this very moment, didn't you? His predatory smile returned, convinced he'd found her weakness. Rosangela's answer was cut short by the judge's gavel. We'll take another 20-minute recess. There are procedural matters I must review with these documents. As the magistrate left with the evidence, the room erupted in noise. Reporters dashed out to call their editors, spectators whispered excitedly, and the Braganza family huddled with their lawyers in an urgent conference. Rosangela needed the restroom, the nerves and 2 coffees taking their toll. She walked down the now emptier hall, most people having gone downstairs for cigarettes or coffee. Pushing open the women's restroom door, she wasn't surprised to find Valentina retouching her crimson lipstick in the mirror, clearly waiting for her. What did surprise her was Tiago leaning casually against the wall as though the women's restroom were his natural habitat. This is the ladies' room, Rosangela said, more a statement than a protest. She knew the family too well to waste energy on useless indignation. My dad's outside keeping watch, Tiago replied, finally slipping his phone into his pocket. We've got a new offer for you, Aunt Rosangela. The aunt rang as false as Valentina's acrylic nails. $100,000. Valentina got straight to the point, pulling an even thicker envelope from her designer bag. Double the last offer, plus a one-way ticket anywhere in the country, Florida, California, wherever you want to start fresh, far from here, far from all this mess. She set the envelope on the sink, the brown paper standing out against the white marble. It's more money than you'd make in 10 years of work. Rosangela moved toward the sink, not the envelope, and calmly washed her hands, the domestic ritual grounding her amid the surreal scene. As she lathered the soap, she spoke without looking at them. Do you know what your father feared most? It wasn't dying. Everybody dies. It wasn't illness. He was strong. He endured pain without complaint. His greatest fear was being forgotten, that you'd erase him from memory the moment his body grew cold. Tiago scoffed impatiently. Drama won't earn you more money, Auntie. But Rosangela continued, drying her hands with the same steady patience. He told me that when you were a kid, Tiago, you loved sitting on his lap to hear stories of when he was a poor boy back home. He said you always asked for the same one, about the first ice cream he ever ate at 12 after a month of farm work. Tiago's expression shifted subtly, a long-buried memory stirring. Valentina cut in quickly. That has nothing to do with... But Rosangela interrupted, finally turning to face them. And you, Mrs. Valentina, remember when you were 15 and wanted to be a ballerina? Your father sold his car to pay for your classes at the City Theater. He rode the bus for 2 years but never complained because he didn't want you to give up on your dream. Valentina's crimson lipstick quivered slightly. That was a long time ago. People change. Her voice lost its rehearsed arrogance, replaced by something rawer, more human. They do change, Rosangela agreed. The man who sold his car for his daughter died holding the hand of a stranger because the ballerina he raised was too busy to hold his. She walked past them toward the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. Keep your money. I promised him I'd tell the truth, the whole truth. And a promise from someone like me isn't for sale, not for 100,000, not for 1 million. Sell your soul once and you'll spend a lifetime trying to buy it back. You should know that by now. Back in the courtroom, the tension was electric. Judge Clarice Vasconcelos returned with a look seasoned attorneys recognized as the calm before a storm. She had reviewed Rosangela's preliminary evidence, and what she saw had shifted her entire perspective on the case. Adjusting her glasses, she delivered words that froze the Braganza family in their seats. Mrs. Batista, I would like you to formally present the evidence you mentioned earlier. Rosangela stood, picked up her black folder, and walked to the center of the room. There was no stand for witnesses, so she improvised, using her chair as a support. From the folder, she pulled out a simple tablet, the kind you buy on sale at a department store. Excuse me, Your Honor. I'm not very good with technology. My son taught me how to use this. But it has 3 years' worth of videos and audio recordings Mr. Ottavio asked me to keep. Evandro Machado immediately rose in protest. Your Honor, we had no prior access to these so-called recordings. This violates the principle of due process and... The judge cut him off with a sharp wave of her hand. Counselor, Mrs. Batista is a witness, not a defendant. She may present what she deems relevant. You'll have an opportunity to contest authenticity later. Proceed, Mrs. Batista. With fingers trembling not from fear but from contained outrage, Rosangela connected the tablet to the courtroom sound system, aided by a court technician. The first audio played, filling the room with Ottavio Braganza's raspy yet lucid voice. Today is March 15th, 2024. I'm recording this because my son, Enrique, came here yesterday, first time in 6 months. You know what he wanted? For me to sign a power of attorney granting him total control over my assets. Said it was for my own good, that I was getting too old to manage things. When I refused, he threatened to lock me in a nursing home, my own son threatening me with a home. Enrique's face drained from red to pale white in seconds. He whispered something urgent to Evandro Machado, who tried to intervene. Your Honor, there's no proof this is truly the deceased's voice. It could be anyone. It could be a fake. Artificial intelligence these days works miracles. But the judge had already anticipated this. Which is why, during recess, I summoned an audio expert from the FBI. Dr. Sakamoto, please. A Japanese-American man with white hair and impeccable posture entered the courtroom. Your Honor, I conducted a preliminary analysis comparing these recordings to old public interviews of Mr. Braganza. The probability it's the same person is 99.7%. I can conduct further testing if needed, but my professional opinion is that these audios are authentic. Rosangela allowed herself a small sigh of relief before continuing. The next video showed Ottavio seated in his armchair, thinner than in the photos the family posted on social media, but with eyes perfectly lucid. Valentina came to visit today. The timestamp showed it was 2 months before his death. She brought a new doctor, some guy who didn't even introduce himself properly. Ran a few ridiculous tests, asking me to count backward, draw a clock, that sort of thing. I did everything right, but I saw him whispering with her in the hallway. I heard her say, "How much for a dementia report?" My own daughter trying to have me declared insane. Valentina sank into her chair, designer sunglasses no longer hiding the tears welling up, not of remorse, but of fury at being exposed. The gallery murmured. A few journalists couldn't disguise their shock. The judge's face remained impassive, but her fingers drummed on the bench, a sign seasoned attorneys knew meant a storm was coming. The silence that followed the second video was broken when Rosangela pulled a simple, spiral-bound notebook from her folder, the school kind, its cover faded and pages yellowed with time. "This is my work diary," she said, her voice growing steadier with each word. "My last employer taught me to write everything down, said it protected you from unfair accusations. 3 years of notes, Your Honor. Every medication given, every meal served, every time a family member showed up or didn't." She opened to a page marked with a colored paper clip. December 23rd, 2023, Christmas Eve. Mr. Ottavio waited for his family all day. He had me make turkey, bread pudding, all the things they loved as children. He bought each of them a gift with his retirement money. He stood at the window from 6 in the evening on. No one came, no one called. At 11, he asked me to put everything away and went to bed. I heard him crying in his room until 2 in the morning. For the first time, Tiago put his phone down completely. Something in that description reached a part of him Instagram followers never saw. But it was when Rosangela produced the receipts that the case truly collapsed for the Braganza family. Stacks of invoices stapled by month, showing pharmacy expenses, specialty groceries for an elderly diet, imported adult diapers because the cheap ones caused rashes. On medication alone, Rosangela recited the total she knew by heart. It was $43,600 over 3 years, out of my pocket. Money I should have been sending to my children back home, but I used it to buy insulin after the family decided the premium health plan was an unnecessary expense for someone who wouldn't last much longer anyway. Mr. Henrique's words, on the phone, September 12th, 2022, at 2:32 p.m. The surgical precision of the details was devastating. "That's a lie. I never," Henrique began, but Rosangela was already playing another recording, this one a saved phone call. His voice was unmistakable. "For God's sake, Valentina, the old man is 90. How much longer can he last? Every month is 50 grand in costs. Cut that private plan already and let Medicaid deal with him." Judge Clarice Vasconcelos removed her glasses, a gesture every attorney present knew meant she had reached a decision. Before we proceed, I need to make a note. In 30 years on the bench, I've seen many family disputes. Rarely have I seen such a thorough evidentiary record assembled with this level of care. Mrs. Batista, do you have anything else to present? That was when Rosangela produced the final item from her folder, a sealed white envelope. "Before he died, Mr. Ottavio gave me this. He told me to open it only if the family tried to invalidate the will. He said it contained final proof that he was lucid and that his wishes were legitimate." She carefully broke the seal, removing a single sheet of paper and a small flash drive. On the drive, she explained as the clerk connected the device, there's a video recorded 3 days before he passed. The image projected onto the makeshift screen showed Ottavio Braganza sitting up in bed, wearing striped pajamas, his face marked by age, but his eyes absolutely clear. At the edge of the frame stood Dr. Paolo Evangelista, a respected geriatrician in New York. Ottavio's voice filled the room one last time. My name is Ottavio Braganza, New York State ID number 3794261-8. I'm recording this in the presence of Dr. Paolo Evangelista because I know my children will try to overturn my will. I leave 40% of my assets to Rosangela Batista because she was more family to me in 3 years than my children were in 60. The remaining 60% should be divided among charitable institutions. For my children, I leave what they gave me in recent years, nothing. The video continued in the courtroom's sepulchral silence, and Dr. Paolo Evangelista's voice filled the space after Ottavio's last words. For legal purposes, I, Dr. Paolo Evangelista, New York Medical License number 895543, attest that Mr. Ottavio Braganza is in full mental capacity on this 18th day of May, 2024. I performed a comprehensive neurologic evaluation, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, and a mini mental state exam, all within normal limits for his age. He is lucid, oriented, and fully capable of making decisions regarding his estate. The camera shook slightly as Ottavio reached forward to adjust it, his face filling the frame. Henrique, Valentina, Tiago, if you're watching this, it means you did exactly what I knew you would. You tried to take from Rosangela what she deserves. For 60 years, I built an empire, thinking I was leaving you a legacy, but money did what it does to so many. It carved the humanity out of your chests. Rosangela never knew about the will until today. She never asked for anything but her paycheck. She cared for me because she has what you lost long ago, genuine compassion. That's why she deserves every cent I left her. Judge Clarice remained silent for long seconds after the video ended, fingers interlaced on the bench, her gaze shifting between the Braganza family and Rosangela. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of 3 decades on the bench. Ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed, I must say this. What we have witnessed here today transcends a simple inheritance dispute. It's a devastating portrait of what greed can do to the most sacred bonds we have, family. She turned to Rosangela, who remained standing, still holding the emptied envelope like a shield. Mrs. Batista, how long have you known the contents of the will? The question caught everyone off guard, including Rosangela herself, who answered with the same honesty she had maintained throughout. I found out at the funeral, Your Honor. His attorney approached me at the cemetery after the family had already left. I nearly fainted when he told me. My first reaction was to refuse. I said I didn't want to cause trouble, but then I remembered what Mr. Ottavio always said. Refusing a gift given from the heart is like spitting on the hand that offers it. Evandro made one last desperate attempt to salvage the case. Your Honor, regardless of how moving these videos are, the law is clear about the rights of heirs. The children are entitled to at least 50% of the estate. The judge peered over her glasses, the look seasoned lawyers feared more than any harsh word. Counselor, you are technically misstating the law. In this jurisdiction, adult children have no guaranteed share. Regardless, even if we were discussing any statutory claims, the evidence presented here would support upholding the will in full, and it raises serious concerns about misconduct. The gavel struck 3 times, each blow thundering through the hushed courtroom. Judge Clarice rose, an uncommon gesture signaling the gravity of the moment, and everyone else stood as well. Having reviewed all evidence, audio, video documents, testimony, I reached the following conclusions. First, the will of Ottavio Braganza is valid and shall be executed in full. The decedent was in full mental capacity when he expressed his last wishes, as thoroughly demonstrated. She paused, her eyes sweeping over the Braganza family, who seemed to shrink with each word. Second, I find clear indicators of elder neglect, abandonment, and attempted obstruction of justice. The attempted bribe of Mrs. Batista, implicitly admitted during this proceeding, constitutes a crime. I order an immediate referral to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation of Mr. Enrique Braganza and Ms. Valentina Braganza Moreira. Valentina let out a muffled sob, her hands shaking so hard that her designer sunglasses clattered to the floor with a sharp crack. Enrique seemed to age 10 years in 10 minutes, his once flushed face now ashen. Tiago had shed the successful influencer act entirely, shrinking in his seat like a teenager being scolded. Third, the judge continued remorselessly, given the proof that Mrs. Rosangela Batista used her own funds, $43,600, for the decedent's medical care, I order immediate reimbursement from the estate prior to any distribution. As to the division of assets, I uphold the testator's express wishes, 40% to Rosangela Batista, 60% to the designated charitable organizations. Evandro's voice came out strangled as he tried to protest. Your Honor, we request time to appeal. But the judge was ready. You're entitled to appeal, counselor. However, given the nature of the proof presented, I'm ordering immediate enforcement. The assets are frozen pending final judgment except for the amount owed to Mrs. Batista for her documented expenses. Court is adjourned. The controlled chaos that followed the final gavel strike was intense. Reporters rushed out, typing furiously as headlines formed about a case destined to become a symbol of filial ingratitude. Court officers managed the orderly exit of the gallery while the Braganza family sat paralyzed, as if still processing the total destruction of their expectations. Enrique was the first to break the stupor. He staggered to his feet and walked over to Rosangela, who calmly filed her documents back into the black folder. Rosangela, please, he said, his voice stripped of arrogance, replaced by raw desperation. Can we talk? Settle this between us? I admit we made mistakes, but you don't have to do this. My father wasn't well when he recorded those things. Rosangela stopped organizing the papers and looked him in the eye, a mix of pity and resolve. Mr. Enrique, your father was more lucid in his final days than you are right now. Do you know the last thing he said to me before he died? Rosangela, my children will try to destroy you, but you're stronger than they are because you know what real love is. He knew you better than you ever knew him. Valentina approached, mascara-streaked tears marking her face. For the first time in decades, she looked vulnerable, human. But he was our father. We're entitled to something. How are we supposed to live? Coming from someone who owned 3 galleries, the question was almost absurd, and Rosangela nearly smiled. The same way I lived while I cared for your father, Ms. Valentina, by working. Besides, you still have your businesses, your apartments, everything you built with the money he gave you during his life. I only have what he chose to leave me after his death." Tiago surprised everyone with the most honest question of the day. Did he suffer? At the end, did he suffer? There was a fragility in his voice his followers would never see, and it softened Rosangela's tone. "No, Tiago. In the end, he was at peace. He said he'd lived long enough to understand the difference between blood family and family of the heart. He died holding my hand and smiling, because he knew at least one person in this world mourned him for real." The morning sun fell softly across the simple but welcoming office of the Otávio Bragança Care House, housed in a renovated brownstone in downtown Manhattan. Now the organization's executive director, Rosângela Batista, reviewed the monthly reports with the same meticulous care she once used to log her employer's medications. 800 seniors served in the first year, 500 caregivers trained free of charge, 30 families reconciled through the mediation program. On the wall behind her desk hung a single photo, her and Mr. Otávio on his last birthday, 91 years old, smiling as she held up a simple homemade cake. There were no pictures of the Bragança family, but Rosângela knew what had become of them. Henrique had been sentenced to 2 years of house arrest for attempted coercion and fraud. His construction company collapsed 6 months later, partners fleeing like rats from a sinking ship once the scandal broke. Valentina closed 2 of her 3 galleries, depression and alcoholism exacting the price of a lifetime spent on appearances. Tiago vanished from social media after the story went viral, his coaching courses discredited. Living now? Who knows how? But Rosângela felt no satisfaction in their downfall. She felt pity. The same pity she'd felt watching Mr. Otávio wait for his family that Christmas Eve. Because now, she understood what he had always known. Money without love is just printed paper, and family without presence is nothing more than a shared last name. That was why she created the Care House, not just to shelter abandoned seniors, but to teach that true care has no price. It can't be bought, sold, or bargained for. Every morning before starting her work, she visited Otávio Bragança's grave at Greenwood Cemetery. There was no grand mausoleum, just a simple headstone bearing the words he had chosen himself. Here lies Otávio Bragança, who learned too late that true love doesn't come from blood, but from care. And beneath it, in smaller letters, added by Rosângela, eternally cared for by the one who loved him without asking for anything in return. On that particular morning, 1 year after the trial, she found fresh flowers at the grave, simple daisies, Otávio's favorite. There was no card, but she knew. Tiago had come back. Maybe there was hope after all, because if Rosângela had learned anything in her hard life, as a woman from the rural South, a maid, and now the guardian of a legacy, it was this: dignity isn't lost when you fall. It's lost when you refuse to rise. And there is always, always time to rise again, so long as you have the humility to take the hand that's offered, even if it's the calloused hand of a maid you once despised.